There's a special kind of silence that doesn't beg for attention. It commands it. You disappeared. You stopped explaining yourself. You walked away, not to hide, but to build. And in that silence, they broke. They broke because they couldn't control what they couldn't see. They broke because they had no idea what you were becoming when you moved in silence. It terrifies them now. Not that you left, but that you're coming back with a power they can't measure. And that's the power they never learned to handle. Watch this video till the end. Let it hit you. And if this speaks to your story, subscribe and like your silence just found a voice. Asterisk, there was a time you stayed, not because you wanted to, but because you thought you had to. You answered every question. You explained yourself when you didn't need to. You tried to keep the peace. You tried to hold yourself small, careful, manageable, because you thought that's what it took to be accepted. But what you didn't see then was that they were never attached to you. They were attached to the version of you they could control. The version that apologized too much. The version that stayed quiet to avoid the fight. The version that bent and folded just to keep them comfortable. That's the version they loved because they could own it. And then you left. You didn't scream. You didn't make noise. You just removed your presence. And the minute you became unreachable, they panicked. Because their power was never in themselves. It was in how much of you they could reach, shape, and pull back. They weren't afraid of losing you. They were afraid of losing the access to you. The access that let them push, take, and decide who you were allowed to become. When you took that away, they didn't just lose a person, they lost their grip. And people don't break when they lose you. They break when they realize they have no say in your next chapter. Your silence wasn't weakness. Your distance wasn't coldness. It was your shift. The moment you stopped trying to be understood and started standing in your own skin, you didn't become harder. You became untouchable. And that's the thing they never learned to handle. They could handle you when you were close enough to catch. They could handle you when you stayed predictable. But they could never handle you when you chose yourself, when you chose to walk away from the places where you were only valued when you stayed small. They feared what they couldn't control. And when you finally realized that, you stopped giving them the pieces they used to keep you there. Asterisk, there's something haunting about silence. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't comfort anyone. It leaves gaps. Gaps the mind can't stop trying to fill. When you walked away, you didn't send warnings. You didn't write long paragraphs. You didn't give them a chance to rewrite the ending. You just vanished. And in that emptiness, you left a question they can't stop. stopped chasing. Why did you leave? They tell themselves stories now. Maybe you left because you were weak. Maybe you walked away because you had no fight left. Maybe you'll come back just like before. But the worst story is the one they can't silence. Maybe you're not coming back at all. Maybe you realized your worth. Maybe you outgrew them so completely they can't even find the language to pull you back. That's the power of unanswered questions. They echo louder than the truth. And now their minds are stuck in a loop. They can't escape. You didn't slam the door. You didn't make yourself the villain. You became something much more dangerous. You became the mystery, the one that slipped away with no explanation, no closure, no permission. They stalk your absence now. They look for pieces of you in places you no longer live. They whisper about you in conversations you're no longer a part of, and the silence, your silence, it's louder than anything you could have said, because they know now. They know the version of you they built their ego around. That version is gone, and what terrifies them isn't the thought of losing you. It's the thought that you left on your terms, that you didn't beg, you didn't plead. You just went quiet. And there's no script for that, no manual to control it, no words that can drag you back into their story. Your absence didn't leave them empty. It left them drowning in their own questions. And those questions will haunt them far longer than your presence ever did. Asterisk, they thought you were circling back. They believed you were still stuck in the same cycle, still tangled in the same pain, still replaying the same story on repeat. Because that's what they do. They don't grow. They don't move. They sit in the comfort of their own noise, expecting you to stay trapped in it with them. But you didn't. You moved on. Quietly, completely. While they recycled old games, you built new chapters. While they stayed loud, you stayed distant, turning your silence into movement, your pain into direction. They didn't notice. They thought your silence meant you were stuck, but you were just busy rebuilding. The version of you they last knew was already gone while they were still waiting to pull you back into their world. That's why it hurts them now. They weren't ready to meet this version, the version that doesn't respond to their games, the version that no longer fits in the spaces where you used to shrink. You didn't have to prove anything. You didn't have to show them how you've changed. Your silence did that for you. Because here's the truth they never wanted to accept. When you truly move on, you stop chasing apologies. You stop explaining your growth. You stop returning to tables where you were once starved. They're still sitting there, still playing the same games, still expecting the same you to walk back through the door. But you already left that room. You already left that version. And now you're somewhere they can't follow. You moved on, while they stood still, waiting for you to come back to a life you've already outgrown. And that's what breaks them the most. Not that you left, but that you never looked back. Asterisk, there's something sacred about disappearing, something powerful about stepping into silence where no one can interrupt your rebuilding. They thought you were gone. They thought you vanished. But you were working in the quiet, far away from their noise, far away from their expectations, far away from the weight they used to put on your shoulders. You weren't wasting time. You were transferring your energy. You were shifting your focus from pleasing them to becoming you. Silence did what noise never could. It taught you how to hold your own weight. Ones, the broken ones, the ones you used to run from. In that silence, you found out that you don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to explain to be right. You don't need to be seen to be strong. While they looked for you in the places you left, you found yourself in the places they could never reach. You traded their validation for your clarity. You traded their attention for your peace and the silence. It changed your wiring. It rewrote your reasons. You stopped moving for them. You started moving for you. They never thought you'd become this dangerous. Not because you're louder, but because now you don't need them to hear you. You don't need them to see you. You've built yourself into someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't fold under pressure. And they can feel it, even from a distance. That energy hits different now. It's not desperate. It's not reaching. It's controlled. It's silent. It's unshakable. You didn't just walk away from them. You walked into yourself. And in that silence, you became untouchable. Asterisk people always think detachment means you've stopped caring, but real detachment, it's not about caring less. It's about finally understanding what's not worth your energy anymore. You didn't detach because you became cold. You detached because you outgrew the need to keep holding onto things that were dragging you backwards. You let go, not with anger, not with noise. You let go quietly, like a storm that doesn't announce itself but still tears through everything in its path. That's the storm they never saw coming. Because you didn't throw words, you didn't fight for space, you didn't beg to be understood. You just stopped showing up for the stories that were never yours to carry. Your detachment wasn't revenge. It wasn't a tactic to get their attention. It was survival. It was you realizing that staying connected to what broke you was the only thing keeping you small. They didn't know how to react to that, because when you fight, they can fight back. When you chase, they can run. But when you detach, there's nothing left for them to pull on. Nothing left for them to control. That's why your silence shook them. You weren't trying to win. You weren't trying to prove anything. You simply stopped participating. And when you stopped participating, you became untouchable. That's the kind of storm they can't survive. The one that isn't loud. The one that doesn't need to be seen. The one that quietly erases the power they thought they had over you. Your detachment was the loudest message you ever sent, and they heard it. They just don't know what to do with it. They were waiting for you, not because they missed you, but because they believed you'd return as the same version they could predict. The version that would still answer their calls. The version that would still feel guilty. The version that would still shrink to fit their comfort. They thought time would wear you down, that your silence was a phase, that you were just cooling off, and you'd eventually return to your old patterns. But they misunderstood you. Your silence wasn't a pause, it was a transition. You weren't standing still. You were stepping into a version of yourself they've never met. A version that doesn't break under pressure. A version that no longer fits into the labels they once put on you. They were waiting for the same softness, but you returned with steel in your spine. They were waiting for the same weakness, but you returned with boundaries they can't climb. It's not that you became cruel, it's that you finally became complete. You no longer needed their permission to move forward. You no longer needed their validation to stand tall. And now they don't know how to approach you. They don't know what to say, because the words they use to trap you no longer work here. The games they used to play, you don't even notice them anymore. That's the power of real growth. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't beg for attention. It just shows up, unapologetically different. You didn't come back for them. You came back for yourself. And that's what scares them. They can't guilt you anymore. They can't shape you anymore. They can't handle the fact that you evolved into someone they never prepared to meet. They were waiting for the old you, but you don't live there anymore. And that realization, it's breaking them now in all the ways they once tried to break you. Asterisk, some people think they can break you and walk away untouched. They think they can keep testing you, keep pushing you, keep taking pieces of you because they assume you'll always come back for more. They never expect to face the version of you that doesn't return. But life has a brutal way of teaching people. Sometimes the lesson isn't in what you say, it's in what you become. You became their consequence. You became their unfinished story. You became the one they can't get back, can't reach, can't control. That's the lesson they never wanted. To learn that someone can outgrow the damage they were supposed to drown in. That someone can walk away without needing revenge. Without needing to be heard. Without needing to be understood. Your evolution wasn't to prove them wrong. It was to prove to yourself that you didn't have to stay where you weren't valued. That you didn't have to keep drinking from empty cups. That you didn't have to keep participating in cycles that only existed to keep you small. They wanted to shape your story, but you rewrote it. They wanted to keep you in their world, but you built your own, and now you are the story they can't finish. The one they still talk about. The one that still echoes in their silence. You didn't need to teach them through words. You taught them by disappearing, by moving on, by becoming someone their hands can no longer hold. You became the chapter that flipped without warning, the door that closed without explanation, the mirror that now forces them to face themselves without you standing there to absorb the damage. And that's what they'll carry now. Not your presence, not your forgiveness, but the weight of knowing you were the one lesson they were never ready to learn. And now it's too late. Asterisk, they wanted to see you broken. They wanted to watch you fall and stay down to see you trapped in the same pain they handed you. That's how they kept score. That's how they fed their illusion of power, by measuring how long you'd stay beneath the weight they put on your back. But you didn't stay there. You didn't collapse under it. You didn't become their victim. You rose, not with noise, not with revenge, but with quiet, deliberate growth. The kind that doesn't beg for attention. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that happens when no one's watching. And here's what they can't say out loud. Your growth is their silent defeat. Because they can't argue with who you've become. They can't fight with your distance. They can't touch the person who's no longer standing in their arena, waiting for you to prove them wrong, waiting for you to scream, to push back, to beg for closure. But you didn't need to win against them. You needed to win against the version of yourself that once believed you needed them. That's where you broke the cycle. That's where you became dangerous. You no longer need to be seen by people who only knew how to look at you through the lens of your weakness. And now, your silence carries a weight they can't lift. Your success echoes in places they can't reach. Your growth has become a reminder of everything that tried to prevent and failed. You didn't take revenge. You didn't destroy them. You simply outgrew them. And that's the one outcome they were never prepared for. Because nothing unsettles people more than realizing the person they tried to break is now someone they no longer have access to. Someone whose existence is now their quiet, permanent defeat.